Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody to the May 10th meeting of the City of Brentwood Planning and Zoning Commission. If you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Sherry Boulderback.
Here.
Michael Damon.
Here.
Mark Pavazza.
Here.
Rebecca Jacobs.
Here.
Clint Lewis.
Here.
Jeff Moore.
Here.
Hart Nelson.
Here.
John Nerman is here. Tom Shipley.
Here.
We have a quorum, Mr. Chairman. Oh, Rocky Ritter.
Here.
We have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Nuremberger. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the April 12th, 2017 meeting minutes? Ms. Schuring, were you not named?
I wasn't named.
Oh, I'm sorry. Lisa Surling.
Here.
I'm sorry.
Let the record reflect that Ms. Schuring is here. Mr. Hart? Mr. Nuremberger, I think you may have missed a few names.
Oh, Michael Hart, I'm sorry.
Here.
Okay. Jennifer Hanson is the only one that's not here, I'm sorry.
Okay, very good.
I'm pardon land.
Are there any revisions to the April 12th, 2017 meeting minutes? Ms. Bilderback?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. During the meeting, I expressed a lot of concern about, as did Ms. Hanson, who unfortunately couldn't be here tonight, regarding the APA proposed rezoning to the UD district. And I don't see any comment in here in the minutes that reflect any opposition that I made. And I also only see one thing that Ms. Hanson said in here as well. And I would like to see the minutes expanded on a little bit. I would at a minimum like my opposition and some of the reasoning for it to be included in the minutes, please, to fully reflect the very lengthy discussion that we had on the topic. And then also, in looking back through it again, I'm not sure that it's reflected in here, which I just spoke with staff and they said they were going to work on. But I had requested in the last meeting that we have a amendment drawn up to amend, or a proposed text amendment to amend the LID district to make the APA's use a conforming use within their current zoning designation. And I would like to make sure that that request is reflected in the minutes as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further revisions to said minutes? Okay, Ms. Kirkemeyer, can you please take care of revising those minutes to reflect Ms. Bilderback's
Yes,
request?
thank
Okay.
you.
Any objection to a motion to table those minutes until the following meeting? Seeing none, it'll be tabled by acclamation. We have two matters under old business. These matters have been taken up at the March general meeting, the March subcommittee meeting, and the April meeting. And I do appreciate how the application has evolved favorably to the city and in accordance with the commission's requests. But is there any objection to once again taking these two matters under old business together? No. Thank you, Commissioner. We'll take those together then. Mr. Mullenix, if you could please step forward and let us know what has happened or what has changed to these two applications for rezoning and for conditional use permit since our April meeting.
Good evening, Commission, City staff. At this point, in regards to the zoning, nothing has changed. We're still entered as co-petitioners with the APA as it stands today. In regards to our development plan and conditional use permit, we do have a few changes, and I really looked at it as addressing the staff's comments overall and recommendations on the report that was presented in the last few days. If you'd like, I can go through that, just let you know where we're at. We're in general accepting of all the changes recommended and willing to provide everything the city needs for the benefit of our project and the city.
So my understanding is that the commission has identified various requests throughout the last few months of meetings, those requests being summarized by Ms. Kirkemeyer in the staff report, and my understanding is that, Mr. Mulnix, you're amenable to each and every one of those changes?
Yes, and I would like to specifically speak to a few of them and just make sure everybody's aware of how we look at it and when these changes will occur.
Okay. Well, tell you what, why don't we turn it over to Ms. Kirkemeyer. Ms. Kirkemeyer, is that the case? I saw you did a comprehensive job of summarizing the various concerns of many of the commissioners, and is it true that Mr. Mulnix has complied with each of those recommendations in his most recent version of his site plan?
Well, in preparation of the April 12th meeting, staff had already listed some recommendations for the P&Z's consideration. And it was duly noted at that meeting that one of the items that needed to be addressed was to work with the adjacent property owner and also with the city's traffic engineer to come up with a solution that, again, would take care of proper traffic management of the site, which those meetings have taken place. There were several meetings that then had occurred after the April 12th P&Z meeting. So I tried to just include in the report, obviously the original plans and everything, but anything that you received in last week's packet for tonight's meeting would have addressed any of the updates or the revisions to the last time this was presented. So for instance, there was an exhibit that I hope everybody received that did call out a few of the traffic improvements, both to the access to Hanley, as well as the landscape comment review was completed since then. And also because the comprehensive signage plan was distributed, I think, right at the meeting, we wanted to make sure that you had time to review that. So I believe the traffic concerns, the landscape comments have been addressed, and at least have been conditioned as the conditional use permit allows to make sure that those things are taken care of. And then I guess the only thing that I would say then still about the comprehensive signage plan is when Andy Franke, Planning Design Studios, helped review that with the city, there still might be some evolution to that comprehensive signage plan. One, for instance, just because some of the monument signs were placed pretty close out to Hanley. As the traffic management plans continue to evolve and arrangements made and so forth, that might be subject to being moved a little bit, as well as still probably talking further with the franchise of Marriott once this plan would at least get through P&Z and maybe move to the Board of Aldermen. So that's why the recommendations from staff says that the comprehensive signage plan would come back. Another reason is I see the adoption center people are here tonight. And again, there would be some attempt to come back with a comprehensive signage plan that would include both property owners. And so again, I guess until really some of the details of this meeting plays out, then again, you'll see a revised comprehensive signage plan in the future, and that will come back here for your review. So those were the main things probably since the last meeting.
So the commission will recall that I think the issue that had the most discussion was traffic. And we had a traffic report in front of us, but we didn't have a site plan that incorporated that traffic report. And since the last meeting, I believe there has been an ingress-egress easement map that hopefully all the commissioners have in front of them. And Ms. Kirkemeyer, it's my understanding that this ingress-egress easement map represents the incorporation of the recommendations of the city's traffic engineer. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. I had that verified by Lee Cannon with CBB.
Okay. And Mr. Mulnix, this ingress-egress easement map is acceptable to you?
Yes, it is. Subject to, I just want to make sure everybody understands that we own the easement. We don't own the property that CBB recommended to change. So at the request of the city, the traffic engineer, we've requested the assistance of the property owner, Greg Kordowski, who's here this evening. And he's, in an attempt to accommodate this recommendation, we've been negotiating for the past 2.5 weeks with that exact drawing. And I feel we have an agreement in principle. Outside of that agreement, there are some other pieces to it which are important both to Greg and myself to address, which is the long-term maintenance of our easement, the affected landscaping at the entrance. There's some mature trees, some other things that we'd want to replace. The cost for the improvements, which we will bear. And some signage issues. We have an existing signage easement that's in there. To Lisa's point, the comprehensive signage plan, we really don't want to go final today because of this exhibit until we get everything final negotiated and understood, and then we'll come back at a later date with the APA and submit that plan. There's one other piece. There's an area of his property on the southwest portion of his property where he has some double-loaded parking spots where he can pull in and out today, but if our project were to be completed per the site development plan, which I don't know if you can show that real quick, he would lose access to that parking. So we presented this to Mr. Twardowski. This is all part of the negotiations, but we're amenable to this. And it keeps everything essentially the same, other than we move the curb line that we proposed, which would be above there. We moved it down to where he originally had the pointer. And then we create a hammerhead turnaround in that location so those end spots are usable. We would give him a reciprocal easement for both of those locations so he can pull in and pull out and in return, he has usable spots. And he also, does it show the monumentation? Yeah, you can see the median right at the edge of our property line. We would take an additional spot. There's 4 on the drawing. That's the exhibit that Mr. Twardowski would lose. And he's potentially amenable to allowing 1 additional spot for some monumentation at that location. Moving that curb line down still meets what we need for water management and dealing with MSD. We think it's a good compromise to make sure he doesn't lose too much parking. We've maintained his parking count except for what we're doing at his front entrance in that 1 space.
I can't really see what's up there. Is that a proposed revision to this ingress?
It's
egress?
something, I just wanted to make you all aware, it's in negotiation. It's something that's come up, but it's not, we're just trying to make it functional in terms of how his spaces are utilized. And it addresses a comment that Lisa has, but it is in negotiations. It is not a final version, as we are still in negotiation.
Okay, thank you. Why don't we address this traffic issue while we're on it? Is Mr. Twardowski? Yeah. Would you mind stepping up for, please? Thank you. We appreciate both Mr. Mullenix and we appreciate Mr. Twardowski trying to work together and address these issues. Is Wayland it's my understanding that you're the president of Wayland Security?
I am.
And it's my understanding that Mr. Mullenix has discussed with you this ingress-egress map.
Yes.
Are you amenable to it?
Yep.
Very good. Thank you, sir. All right, well, I appreciate both of you gentlemen for working out that issue, which it's my understanding that Mr. Cannon is amenable to this ingress-egress map.
That's correct.
And it's his opinion that satisfies his opinions and recommendations in his traffic engineer report.
Yes.
Very good. It's also my understanding that was a major outstanding issue that was left with this site plan, but why don't we talk about any other issues that commissioners may have for the site plan, and then we can talk about rezoning. Any commissioners have any questions on the site plan? Ms. Filderback.
I would like somebody to go over the changes to the landscaping plan. And it's hard to see on we've got big plans for the original ones, but not for the new draft landscape plan revisions, so.
So it's my understanding that our landscape engineer, Mr. Frankie, made several recommendations, all of which were incorporated into the landscape plan. Is that correct, Ms. Kirkemeyer?
Right, and actually, I guess some of what was just said about the, what you saw was the parking plan up further towards the hotel project. Actually, that stemmed again from Andy Frankie's comments. So we provided the initial letter that he sent back, and he was talking about, again, if that curb is placed there, it would make those parking spaces unusable. So those were the changes then that were addressed with what you were just shown. Most of the 17 comments were just change out on the actual plantings themselves, so I think you can kind of compare those and know that those have been taken care of. Some other, I would still say more minimal changes about plantings around transformers and things like that. So I think really on landscaping, the one thing that needs to have your attention drawn to though is still that based on the landscaping requirements that we currently have, it does call out for a 5-foot tree landscape buffer around the perimeter of the development. And so I think initially it couldn't be done, or it was tricky on 3 sides. They made one side work, but we still have the, thank you, we still have the western property line along the Metrolink tracks, which is Metrolink, or I'm sorry, Bi-State right-of-way. And then we also have the southern property line, which abuts the APA Adoption Center. So those still cannot be met, putting that 5-foot strip in. So what we included in the recommendations at the back of the staff report is still, I called it a variance, and I wish I wouldn't have, because variance makes it think that it's got to go to the Board of Adjustment. I would say it's a waiver of that requirement, and there is a section in the UD, the urban district, that talks about under use regulations with the side and rear yard setbacks, that again, the landscaping plan, maybe I should probably read it though. Let me just read that to you. I think I can flip here and find it pretty quickly. Yeah, I had it highlighted. So this is what it says. The site landscape treatment and grading and any visual screening to be provided in any side or rear yard shall be determined by the recommendation of the Planning and Zoning Commission and the Board of Aldermen by site plan approval in accordance with Article 2, Division 9, which are your site plan review requirements. So that's why that was still put as a recommendation, though, in the staff report. So that, if you wanted to say if there's any comments that was not addressed, that would be the one that was not addressed. Or the landscape plan revised to show that they were able to put the 5-foot strip around the entire parcel.
Thank you, that's helpful, and obviously I read the report. One of the things that historically I've really liked about our Planning and Zoning Commission is we hire consultants, but we also do our due diligence as a commission, which means that we actually look at and read the site plans, and we look at and read the landscaping plan, and we understand it and all of that, and this is really helpful. It's just so tiny that on the revision, I mean, obviously we've got the large plans, Joan and I got them for the rest of it, that I can't really, you know, I can understand what you're saying, and I can understand what he put in his report, but I can't compare it or look at this with any type of true understanding and picture of what the site's going to look like. I don't know if perhaps if Mr. Mullinex, if your folks might have that we could put up on a slide on the screen, like a blow up of the landscape plan, and maybe you guys could go over it.
And I guess then maybe also you would like to, from this point forward, get full-size prints?
Yes, I mean,
in your
until
packet?
recently, we used to all the time, and it would drive our recorder crazy because we would be shuffling our papers to try to get them out. But I think that it lends itself to a much more in-depth and robust review. Because, I mean, unless you get a magnifying glass out, and I've got 20/20 or better vision, I can't see this.
Did you have particular questions with regard to any of the recommendations?
I'm not sure about the 5-foot thing. I'm trying to get a visual on some of it and what the landscaping is actually going to look like, and that's what I'm having trouble with. Because a lot of times you can see things, you know, in black and white and they're little circles. In this case, you can't really make out the circles, but it's hard to get a picture of it, and I don't want to make a mistake.
Yeah, that's good. Ms. Bilderbacker, here,
Is this the
here's a
revision?
full-size landscape plan, if you wouldn't mind. Maybe you can address that, and we can go on to somebody else, and you can raise any other issues.
Well-
And there's a corresponding letter that was sent.
Right.
From Landscape that goes through all the changes that he made from the city's consultant. A lot of it had to do with tree caliper sizes.
You can go to the microphone, Mr. Chiodini.
Yeah, I was looking for the developer to basically summarize it for me, like
Okay,
not me to
that's-
sit here by myself and try to figure it out really quickly while everybody's talking about stuff that I miss.
Mr. Chiodini, are you able to do that? Can you please introduce yourself for the record, and just, if you could describe the recommendations that were made by Mr. Frankie and how the developer has incorporated them?
Chris Chiodini with Chiodini Architects. This is kind of the letter that accompanied from Landscape Technologies was a point-by-point addressing of Mr. Frankie's comments. Number one, all the deciduous trees have been upsized to 3-inch caliper with the exception of one crimson queen Japanese maple, the one pink Kusa flowering dogwood, and the 2 saucer magnolias. These trees are simply not available at a 3-inch size throughout this region. Number 2, with the updated site plan, the planning.
Can you tell me where those are generally on the plan?
Well, it's all the deciduous trees have been upsized,
Okay.
except for the Japanese maple, the flowering dogwood, and the magnolia.
So if I look for it, you're much faster and you know where it is better than I
Rick, do we still have one of that blow-up? So we could project it onto the screen? Do we still have that
Yeah,
blow-up?
so everybody could see.
for the letters.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have copies of the letter. Yeah, we all have copies of the letter. I'm
If
sorry.
you want
we
to
all
read
have
the
copies
letter,
of
here's the letter if you want to use your screen.
It's going to be a matter of going through all of it. Saucer magnolia is SMAG, so any of the SMAGs are the only ones that are not increased to a 3-inch caliper.
Yeah, on the microphone, yeah. He's got it up there. You could point it out up on the,
Yeah, it's not going to be clear enough to be able to read the legend and identify what's around the building.
do you want to look at this and then tell us up there? You know what I mean? So everybody can then see where you're pointing with your pointer. Would that help? And then I can see it when you point to it, obviously.
So some of the saucer magnolias are the smaller trees in here, in the, which is really a retention area. It's like that's the only place those were used. Flowering dogwood. There are some PKD designations of the smaller flowering dogwoods, kind of in these corner areas of the building themselves. And the other one is the Japanese maples. Again, the Japanese maples, you know, all of these are kind of smaller, lower growth trees. So the Japanese maples, again, were used at decorative, the decorative inserts in the corners. So really, the smaller trees have been kept to where we're up against the building. We don't want a lot of room for growth, but we're just getting the color from those.
Okay.
So I'd say most of those areas are in these nooks and crannies that kind of pop up around the building is where he's used those. And there's only those 3 trees that have not been increased to a 3-inch caliper.
Okay.
His second comment was, with the updated site plan, plantings around the transformers and/or utility structures have been adjusted. Our transformer location is back in this corner here. So again, just showing additional plantings to screen the transformer. Number 3, landscape screening has been added on the east side of the garage and the bioswale with plants that can also withstand moist soils. So that's everything along here.
And could you explain a little bit more about that, about the moist soil and how that's?
It's
gonna
designed
work
as a
here?
bioswale, so we will have to have some water quality on here for MSD, so they're all plants that can tolerate an area that's holding water,
Okay.
that the excess water won't just kill the plants. Various turf areas have been labeled, so that was just labeling what is grass and what is differentiating what is grass and what is planted areas. So in some of the areas, like, it's hard to see here, but wherever there aren't any little circles for trees on the drawing has been designated as turf. China boy and there were always China hollies on here, but now they're China boy and China girl hollies.
So they can have their berries and get along well with
Exactly.
each other?
Right.
And remind me where those are on the plan?
I believe they are along the garage.
I saw it, I saw the name on there, I think, but I couldn't tell where it was pointing to.
CH. Again, those are kind of in the clusters here. They're again around the color, just a smaller decorative plant in the corner. So in those corners, you've got a lot of color flowering trees in the springtime and things, so they're all in those areas as well.
And those have enough room I'm trying to get a sense of the distance to grow, because I know hollies can get pretty wide and then they end up getting butchered and they
Yeah,
don't
and
look so fabulous later.
These are both of a variety that don't get that large. That was one of his landscape technologies comments, is he couldn't go to 3-inch calipers or larger plantings on these because they're not meant to get that big,
Right.
because they're so close to the building and in these tight areas. Mixed annuals are called out. Again, we've got some areas, once we're getting away from the building and where we don't have turf, those are all called out as mixed annual planter beds.
And then do you have irrigation and things like that for the
Yeah, the
beds
full site
and-
will be irrigated.
Okay.
Number 8 was, again, addresses the buffer areas that we really can't accommodate, which is here and along the south, where we've got some small retaining walls that are right on the property line. Those will be modular retaining walls. Again, irrigation, he's put some
Oh,
additional irrigation.
John has a question. He's having a little voice trouble, so
I'm
he's
sorry.
going to whisper to me. But how high are
Yeah.
the walls
Yeah.
and how far do
On
they
the
set
backside.
back? Like
Yeah.
this way and this way? We ran into this with one
Yeah,
development where some of our residents were concerned after they saw the giant
They're
retaining.
all up against the railroad track, basically, but I was just curious how high they are.
3 to 5 feet-ish.
3 to 5 feet.
Closer to 3 than 5.
So just for the audience's sake, about 3 to 5 feet, so
Right.
really small.
Right.
Thank you.
Again, irrigation's been noted. Number 10 was more in reference to note 2, which he references several times, which was plantings around the utility transformers and things like that. The wheel stops that were in question were not on our property. Again, number
Okay.
12 was note 2, having to do with utility lines. 13 was the lighting, and I think as Mr. Mullinex indicated, that we're going to be working to more define that lighting plan, and final photometrics will be turned in with the drawings. 14 was C note 2 again. 15 was C note 8, that had to do with the setbacks that we're able to maintain with the emergency access around the building. All the trees, it's been made sure that they all meet the city of Brentwood's requirements for the city of Brentwood's tree list. and that was number 16 and number 17.
Okay, thank you, that's very helpful. And this would normally be something that I would talk about at a site plan committee meeting, but because Mr. Mullinex was doing the good work on the pavement, traffic-related issues, we didn't have a site plan, so there's a lot of things that I still have questions about and would like to dig into a little bit more. So normally I wouldn't take this much time at this meeting. You know, maybe it needs to go to site plan, I don't know, but,
Well, for the record, we did have a site plan in March.
Right.
And there was
And some-
appreciate everybody that came to that site plan, and we took up several items, most of the items except for traffic at that site plan meeting.
well, I had still questions, like I would like to hear from Lee Cannon about the traffic itself, and he's not here tonight. I mean, I know that our planning director is saying that he approves it, but I would like to have some dialogue about it. You know, unfortunately, I couldn't make that one meeting, but a lot of times with a development of this size, we have 2 site plan committee meetings, so it's not at all unusual to do that. So anyway, I've got questions, and, you know, I'll ask what I can right now, but obviously with the traffic, I can't ask Mr. Cannon because he's not here.
Okay. Any further questions from commissioners on the site plan? Yes, Ms. Jacobs.
I just have a quick question, and forgive me if this has already been discussed, but I'm just wondering if there's any pedestrian access from the hotel to Hanley Road for the restaurants, and I would think that you would, you know, the people at the hotel would want to walk and take advantage of some of those. Just wondering.
Yeah, due to the width of the easement and the access, we don't have a direct sidewalk between the hotel and Hanley Road.
That's unfortunate.
Now, can I ask, though, I believe, though, again, probably from Mr. Jadarski's property, but there is pedestrian access kind of from your corner of the building up to Home Depot area? Up to,
Along Canby Road there is.
okay.
Not from us front door, we all walk the easement. We all walk the road.
Okay.
And Ms. Kirkemeyer, I do notice, to address Ms. Jacobs' point, that one of your recommendations is that Mr. Mullinex would plan for a pedestrian connection to a potential Metrolink connection.
In the future, yes. Should be.
Correct,
would-
which we will provide. That would be at the southwest corner of our property.
So that would be at Strasser and Hanley Industrial, which wouldn't address Hanley Road. Any further questions from commissioners? Mr. Ritter?
So I guess looking at the proposal, they're talking about, they're gonna remove the planter that's on the landscaping on the entrance, on the south side of the entrance, I guess. She said that there are negotiations of that. Huh? Along, well, in the landscaping plan, it shows all the plantings in front of the parking spaces.
Is that what you're talking about?
Well, I'm looking at the landscaping plan, the spot I got highlighted
Right, right.
is on the landscaping plan, but then there it doesn't show anything. So,
Right now, there's a strip of landscaping here that kind of mirrored along the parking garage. We have this, you know, we've got the monument signs that we're looking at putting here to identify the site. So we'll be landscaping this island, this side of the drive, so we still get that entryway. But in order to access both sides of these parking spaces, we will not have any landscaping on that side.
Good pickup, Mr. Ritter. Any further points on that?
not this one.
Yes, Mr. Shipley?
This question might need to be tabled when the APA comes up, but the APA was here a couple months ago. And part of your description of the current state of the property, you mentioned that fence, the chain link fence, which when I went over to see the inside, I did a tour of the inside and it looks great. The outside, is that part of this? Is that fence going to be, is the landscaping going to be improved, the whole 3 parcels?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have a landscape plan for that, no.
Could introduce yourself for the record, sir?
I'm sorry, David Ziegler, representing the APA. We don't have a specific landscape plan in place, no. The point was really just, we've got some plantings that are there now, but they're not very attractive. They're kind of old, dead trees, and really what we want to do is remove the fence and put in some, just some, regular bushes and stuff like that, just to improve it. And we were going to do that as part of the improvements with Mullinex, but we don't have a plan for that yet.
Thanks.
Any further questions from commissioners? Mr. Nurnberger?
I'm just saying that's why I think the APA should have been part of this site plan. And I really am still kind of mixed on whether we should just do the hotel by itself and not do the APA at all and separate out the zoning for that. And then the APA can come back to us in the future to, if they want to do some improvements. I'm fine with the hotel going in as it stands right now if we take the APA out. That's what I think we should do that. But
So the only, Ms. Kirkemeyer, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that the only site plan that's before the commission right now is the hotel. The only issue implicating the APA is a rezoning request of both the hotel and the APA.
That's correct.
There's no site plan at all before the commission with regard to the APA.
No, there's no plans that they have that would trigger site plan review at this time, so no.
so that's my point. I don't think we should change zoning unless we have a site plan in front of us.
Any further questions from commissioners? Ms. Bilderbeck?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would concur with Mr. Nurnberger, and that's my biggest issue with this. I think, I may still have some more questions regarding the hotel, but obviously, and I believe I said last time, I think that the hotel is a good idea, and I think there's a way to make all of the issues work. I don't know if I can get to a comfort level myself with it tonight still, like I said, because Mr. Cannon's not here, but I'm supportive of the idea of the hotel. I appreciate the work that Mr. Mullinex has done on that, and I really believe it would be imprudent of us to approve a zoning for a property where we don't have a site plan, and it's kind of a reverse order. And I've went on the record, if anybody wants to watch the video, it's not necessarily in the minutes, but about the reasons why that is a concern. I think Mr. Nurnberger mentioned some of that, but the idea that, this whole area of Hanley Industrial Court, we've had this idea back when we first did the UD, and I was on the commission at that time, where eventually the properties would convert naturally as we went through the course of time when new developments would come in and different things would happen. But it was never our intention to have properties rezoned without having site plans or actual physical proposals that were coming into us at the time. I mean, otherwise, under a comprehensive plan, why not just go rezone the whole Hanley Industrial Court or part of it? Or like, for example, along Brentwood Boulevard and near the home where I used to live, it was shown as future commercial. Why not just, rezone it before we have the site plan, and so a developer can just come in and already have the zoning there? Part of the negotiations and the process and understanding if something made sense for the city was to go through that process hand in hand like we are with the hotel. And as you can see, there's a lot of different details and a lot of different questions that come into play with that. So I definitely would be supportive of the hotel, though, like I said, I still have a few remaining questions that I would like more time on. But barring that, I'm supportive of the hotel, but I really strongly feel that to do our duty as a planning commission, that we should have site plans and not just rezone property. I have a feeling, and I could be wrong, it's not really about the non-conforming use, which we can resolve through amending the current LID for the APA. If that was the issue, as we talked about at the last meeting, that's a way to fix that problem, which really isn't a problem because it's a non-conforming use, which means it's allowed to continue until, they would sell the property or something along those lines. So that's a way to resolve that issue. If I'm with Mr. Nurenberger, if later the APA or someone that they sell the property to wants to come in and do something different, perhaps to be an ancillary development to the hotel or something else in the future, because it may not remain the APA. They may be planning to sell it to someone else. Let's rezone it now and then come in with something else later. I mean, we just don't know. So to be prudent, it would make a whole lot of sense to me, and it would be consistent with the entire time that I've been on this commission, that we would wait to zone or rezone the APA property until such time as we had a site plan and an actual proposal there. So I would concur with Mr. Nurenberger.
Mr. Chair.
Okay.
I
Yes,
have
Mr. Nelson.
a couple questions if I could. First of all, does this body have the ability to we have a petition before us? Do we have the ability to only act on one part of that petition?
My understanding is that we do. Is that correct, Ms. Kirkmeyer?
Correct. Even though it's a petition with co-petitioners, each parcel a motion could be taken separately on each
Separate.
parcel.
That's what I understood from last time. Second question I had was, is my understanding correct that even if we do choose to rezone, that a site plan review very well would be triggered if something were to, or if there was basically a project on the APA site? So-
Right, that's correct. It was part of the ordinance before, but one of the text amendments that you reviewed at the last meeting, and that one you did forward to the Board of Aldermen with a favorable recommendation, was to really make that quite crystal clear. So yes, any existing buildings, even if this, for instance, the adoption center was put in the UD district, if there was any alterations, expansions, or changes in that property, it is subject to all the site plan review approval as in accordance with the Article 3, so.
So if I understand correctly, even a rezoning at this point would mean that a new project would not avoid this body, that we would have the opportunity in most
Right.
cases to.
I don't see it as a way, if the zoning was even granted, then it's a way to circumvent the code, if you will, because it would have to come back here. And one thing I tried to convey at the last meeting, but there was a lot of information, obviously, we shared. But again, I think there are certain reasons why the APA, and we went over that pretty thoroughly at the last meeting, as to why they want to be part of the zoning petition. And one of them, I guess I wanted to still point out, is that one of the factors that stands up in courts for rezoning petitions is, what does your comprehensive plan say, and what are basically the adjoining zoning districts and uses of the nearby properties. So I did put by your desk tonight, I did not include this in your packet, but if you would look at the zoning map that's in front of you, all of this area here that is already zoned PD and UD, and everything you see below in light industrial district, is categorized in our future land use plan map of our existing comp plan to be regional mixed-use development. So again, aside from the reasons why APA has expressed to be rezoned and why commissioners certainly formulate your own opinions, I think still from the city's perspective, when you look at this zoning map, I also think it would be very advantageous to the city for this area that we now have as regional mixed use in our plan to be considered for the UD and PD zoning, as long as, again, you don't prematurely rezone property and then would not have review of any change of use or site plans. But I think that has been covered by, certainly the text amendment that was here at the last meeting, I think helped clarify that. But again, I thought maybe this would help to show that, again, the idea would be at least to hopefully fill in, this area here with UD. Because the one thing too is, even though that the comp plan shows that, the other thing is too, in order to really kind of stimulate development as well, there could still be some apprehension of people wanting to come in here and redevelop properties if they know that they're still right next to light industrial. So there's obviously reasons for, and everybody just has to, kind of formulate their own opinion, of course, so.
Well, do you believe that maintenance of the APA site alone as an LID zone would be compliant with our comprehensive plan, Ms. Kirkemeyer?
Well, I guess you could say that about all of the property potentially that's zoned light industrial, but, this is not gonna happen overnight to zone all of it. But again, I guess when you just look at what the nearby uses of the property are and the nearby zoning districts, those are factors to rezone property that have always been known to kind of hold up in court. So that's why I kind of focus in on this area, that it could be timely to rezone it at this time, so.
Okay, hang on. Any other questions?
Thank you,
from-
Mr.
Now that
Chair.
we've moved on to rezoning, any other questions about rezoning from commissioners? Ms. Bilderback.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To answer Mr. Nelson's question, the reason in my mind why we would wait to do the zoning and not just rely on the site plan process alone is because there's not as much incentive for a property owner or developer to work with the city if they already have the zoning. It's something that we've dealt with for a very long time on the Planning Commission, and we've found that applicants have been very responsive to us under a situation where both things were involved, and we were able to get more favorable changes to the site plan for the city by dealing with both of the processes at the same time. It also was not any less friendly to the development community. In fact, on a lot of our large applications, when we went through these things at the same time, we would meet weekly with the applicant for weekly site plan committee meetings to hash out and go through the details so that it didn't slow down their time frame. So I think it can also be done in a friendly manner in partnership with the development community. And I actually was around when we did the comprehensive plan, the last one, and was a part of the comprehensive planning process. And again, as I said before, our intention wasn't to go out by saying, oh, that we see this as being this future mixed use, was not to, go out and proactively rezone properties before we had site plans. That was never our intention in any of the discussions that we had at the commission meetings at that time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions, comments by commissioners? Any member of the audience like to address the commission on either of these applications for rezoning or for site plan approval? Any further discussion by the commission? If not, the chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to
Bilderback.
make a motion, and I have to think about how I want to do this. So I could use a little help, John, in trying to craft this, but I would like to recommend approval of the hotel site plan and rezoning with the recommendations that staff has outlined, with the additional item that Mr. Ritter called out on the landscaping clarification, that be noted on the plans as well, while removing from the approval of the application the proposed APA property rezoning, so amending the recommendation to strip out the APA rezoning, which thus, of course, would take any other reference to the APA out of the recommendation for approval to the Board of Aldermen.
So let's take this one by one, because we've discussed them together, but it doesn't mean we should vote on them together. So let's first take the application for rezoning. Before us is an application for rezoning of the APA and the hotel site. So if you'd like to make a recommendation about that particular
Sure.
application, please do so.
So on that application, I would make a recommendation that we recommend approval of the hotel site for the UD rezoning only, and that the APA be stripped out of the rezoning approval.
I would second that.
There's a motion and a second to rezone only the hotel from LID to UD. Ms. Carr, is there any issue with taking this motion up and then even notwithstanding any of the result at all, then taking up the application, should there be one made as it's submitted?
Well, you are going to have to make an affirmative decision on both aspects of the application, which means that you need to make a recommendation on the zoning of the APA parcel and the hotel parcel. I think that the cleaner way to do it would be to do a motion and a vote to consider them separately, and then to have a motion for the rezoning on the hotel parcel, and then a motion for the rezoning on the APA parcel.
That's fine. Mr. Chairman, I would like to amend my motion that we consider the hotel rezoning separately from the APA rezoning proposal, that they both be considered separately on their own merits.
Second.
Okay, does everybody understand the motion? The motion at this point is simply to consider the rezoning application on the two parcels separately. Everybody understand that? Okay. We can do it. Let's do a roll call. Roll call?
Sherry Bilderback,
Yes.
Mark Favazza,
Yes.
Michael Hart,
Yes.
Rebecca Jacobs,
Yes.
Clint Lewis,
Yes.
Jeff Moore,
Yes.
Hart Nelson,
Yes.
John Nuremberg is yes, John Ritter,
Yes.
Lisa Sherling,
Yes.
Tom Sichley.
No.
Motion passes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so the commission will consider the applications for rezoning. And just for the record, so I see that the Hanley Road, or the hotel is 1695 South Hanley. What is the address of the APA?
1705.
1705. So what is 1693?
The-
We have multiple addresses on the existing.
Okay, so we're really just talking about 1705 and 1695, correct?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, the commission will take up the applications for rezoning of the two parcels separately. Is there a motion in that regard?
Mr.
Yeah,
Point of
Mr.
order,
Nelson.
or actually, a question, I guess. We have 3 on the petition. So I'm sorry, just to make sure I'm clear, we will have one that is 1693, 1695, and a separate that is 1705? Is
It's
that
my
correct?
understanding that 1693 is the same as 1695. Is that correct?
Correct. The existing building has right now, two separate uses.
Okay, I just want to make sure
Sure.
we're
No,
consistent
good.
with the petition.
It's good. So with the motion to approve now that we're going to take these together, the motion to approve should be 1693 and 1695 together, and then 1705 separately.
Don't you have a vote for the APA not, didn't she say to do another vote for APA not to be included? Is that?
No, the motion will just take the two applications.
Okay,
separately.
okay, I'm sorry.
All right, Ms. Bilderback?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to approve 1695 and, what's the other number?
1693.
1693 rezoning application, and that's it, yeah.
Okay, so is there a second?
Yes, second.
So the motion, which has been seconded, is to rezone the hotel from LID to UD. Is there any further discussion? Solely talking about the hotel at this point. Roll call, please.
And for the record, Mr. Moran showed up for the meeting, so he's. Yeah. So, Sherry Bilderback,
Yes.
Mark Vaza,
Yes.
Michael Hart,
Yes.
Rebecca Jacobs,
Yes.
Clint Lewis,
Yes.
Jeff Moore,
Yes.
Paul Moran,
Yes.
Hart Nelson,
Yes.
Don Nuremberg is yes, John Ritter,
Yes.
Lisa Sherling,
Yes.
Tom Shipley.
Yes.
Motion passes, Mr. Chairman.
Unanimously. Okay, so the recommendation of the commission will be to rezone the hotel from LID to UD. Is there a motion with regard to the application for rezoning of 1705, which is the APA from LID to UD?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion which has been seconded to rezone 1705 South Hanley Road, which is the APA from LID to UD. Is there any further discussion? Okay, Mr. Moore?
Briefly, I'm going to vote against your recommendation simply because if I understand this correctly, we're talking about a fence and a couple of trees and a curb along the easement. There's no other proposed changes to the APA property.
Signage.
See no reason why to hold up the applicant in the project as a whole as opposed to doing it in parts.
Further discussion? And I'll give you a chance to talk. Ms. Bilderbeck?
Thank you, Mr. Moore, for sharing that. I guess I don't view it as holding up the hotel project at all, and actually, I believe that there are some other plans that are out there relative to the APA site that we just aren't privy to right now. So that's one of the reasons why I feel so strongly about it.
Further discussion? Okay, roll call on the motion to rezone the APA site at 1705 from LID to UD.
Sherry Bilderback,
No?
Marv Favaza,
No.
Michael Hart,
Yes.
Rebecca Jacobs,
Yes.
Clint Lewis,
No.
Jeff Moore,
Yes.
Parma Mann,
Yes.
Hart Nelson,
Yes.
Don Yimmer is no, John Ritter,
No.
Lisa Sherling,
No.
Tom Shipley.
Yes.
So 1, 2, 3.
I believe it was 7 noes, 5 ayes.
Yeah, that would,
I think it was 6
Yes.
6.
You had more? Bill?
What do you show, Mr. Nurnberger?
yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 no's. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 yeses. Mr. Chairman,
And the chairman will break the tie in favor of the application for rezoning.
a yes.
Okay, so the recommendation of the commission will be that the APA site also be rezoned to UD. Is there a motion with regard to the site plan application of the hotel, which is the only site plan before the commission?
Motion to approve with staff recommendations, Mr. Chairman, for the site plan.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second to approve the hotel application incorporating all of the recommendations that staff has made and to which the applicant and Mr. Twardowski, the property owner, are amenable. Is there any discussion on that? Ms. Bilderbeck?
Mr. Ritter's comments on the plan that aren't reflected in the documentation?
Good point.
With regard to
The landscaping plan that they submitted isn't accurate. So I guess their negotiations, I guess my question would be is, it didn't seem as their negotiations on the driveway were complete, they're still ongoing. So is that gonna change their plan?
The recommendations of staff are to approve this easement exhibit,
Okay.
and both Mr. Mullenix and Mr. Twardowski have indicated that they were amenable to that easement exhibit. So this is a condition to approval of the application, that this be implemented.
Well,
I think, though, Mr. Ritter's point was the landscape plan still shows the curb, for instance, that
Removing the
would
curb
block
and
the
the
back
buffer.
out spaces. So I think then if again, the agreement includes the exhibit that was shown here tonight, the one that's up there, then the landscape plan would have to be revised in accordance with that exhibit. Is that,
And
Okay.
Mr. Mullenix, do you want to address that?
That, if we're talking about that plan right there, it addresses one of the comments I just saw today about how to address the curb line. In effect, it addresses that and addresses our negotiation on maintaining some of his parking. If you look at her, I gotta find it, find the exact comment. It's the landscape area located on the southeasternmost part of the site shall include a concrete curb to establish a property line and prevent patrons using the adjacent parking lot from backing into the landscaped area. What we've done is create that hammerhead to keep that from happening. And then in addition, we've maintained his existing parking. That's really so we're addressing a comment in the process.
So what you're saying is that the incorporation of all of staff's recommendations would address both Mr. Ritter's points and would address the necessary revision to this easement exhibit?
Yes.
And then in turn, we would have to get this landscape plan revised to reflect it, so all of it says the same thing, so.
Okay. Mr. Nurnberger.
Just about he said something about the sightings plan being not complete or whatever. Is that going to be part of this vote, or is that going to be tabled and brought back at another time with the complete package?
My understanding is that comprehensive sign plan is not part of this approval. That's going to come back to the commission.
Right, that's
Correct.
the recommendation.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Okay, so roll call on approval of the site plan incorporating all of the recommendations of staff.
Sherry Bilderback? Oh, we have a motion already?
Yes,
Okay,
yes, sir.
okay. Sherry Bilderback?
I'm going to vote with the comment first. I really think that we should send this to site plan to have a second site plan meeting on a project of this magnitude. I don't feel that I have the information that I need, but that said, I'm going to vote yes.
Mark Favazza?
Yes.
Michael Hart?
Yes.
Rebecca Jacobs?
Yes.
Clint Lewis?
Yes.
Jeff Moore?
Yes.
Paul Moran?
Yeah.
Hart Nelson?
Yes.
Don Nuremberger is yes. John Ritter?
Yes.
Lisa Sherling?
Yes.
Tom Shipley?
Yes.
Motion passes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, very good, unanimously. All right, well, thank you, Mr. Mullenix, and thank you, Mr. Twardowski, for your cooperation. I think the application has improved considerably, and that's thanks to you and thanks to all the commissioners that were involved in over the last 3 months with this application. But thank you for your cooperation.
Okay, excuse me, Chairman. So, so the vote, if we wouldn't mind taking the vote again, I didn't catch it, but the motion only included the approval of a favorable recommendation for the site development plan, but it was for the conditional use permit. I believe everybody realized that, but still, if it wasn't in the motion, our land use attorney would suggest that we make sure we put conditional use permit in that motion.
I'll tell you what, is there any, it was a unanimous vote, so is there any objection to approving the conditional use permit for the hotel?
My apologies for the unclear motion.
If not, it'll be passed by, if there is an objection, we can take a vote, otherwise it'll pass by acclamation. Any objection to the conditional use permit for the hotel?
No.
Seeing none, the conditional use permit is also passed unanimously.
All right, sorry about that, thank you.
No problem, thank you. Okay, thank you, all of you. It's getting past 8 o'clock, so we'll take up this Mobile on the Run. Is the applicant here from Mobile on the Run? Okay, very good. Step forward, sir, and introduce yourself and your application.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Kevin Camp. I'm with Civil and Environmental Consultants. I'm representing the Wallace family and Mobile on the Run here at the site. Very simple application here, and I really do thank you for tabling this last month. I could not, unfortunately, be here. I was in Jefferson City doing some other things. So really the only thing before you tonight is there is a very simple modification to the site development plan, and all it is to widen the entrance that is along Brentwood Place, which is one of the side streets that comes off of Brentwood Boulevard that provides access to the facility. Really, that is the primary route for the transport trucks. And from a safety consideration and some other things like that, there were some near misses with an existing light standard that exists at the current opening. And so we just want to widen that entrance a little bit in order to accommodate that truck movement. I think we did provide some auto turn movements and things like that throughout the process. I think Lisa could probably add that, County Highways has no objections and things like that. It is really, primarily, there's no change of use, there's no anything like that. We're really just trying to improve the safety of that circulation for that transport truck. Happy to answer any questions that the commission may have.
Thank you, Mr. Camp. Ms. Kirkemeyer, staff report.
I think probably Mr. Camp actually covered everything. We did go out to the site, though, obviously, to visit as we were preparing the staff report. This property received conditional use permit approval back in 2008. Some of you probably remember reviewing it at that time. Everything seems to be in place in order and still meeting the conditions of that original CUP in 2008. There are a few plantings, bushings that would have to be replaced, but that becomes an issue over time, whether this even came before this group or not. So, and I believe I did hear Mr. Camp say that we did pass this site plan just through Glenn and Toby over at St. Louis County. It's not impacting the Brentwood Boulevard accesses, but just out of kind of courtesy, we just went ahead and sent it to them, and they didn't have any issue with it. But I think otherwise you probably covered everything else, so.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Questions from commissioners for this applicant? This is pretty, Mr.
From
Cavazza?
from what I see there, the western part of that easement in is going to stay the same, correct?
Correct.
And then how far back is the eastern, I mean, how many?
It's approximately like 7 feet. 6
Okay,
feet.
7 feet.
Yeah.
I just didn't see it anywhere in
So
their house.
what happens is the
Right.
transport trucks come from Highway 40.
Right.
And so then they make a left onto Brentwood Place and then circle on that left. And so what
Okay.
we want to try to do is prevent any kind of like knee-jerk kind of reactionary kind of things because of the traffic volume.
I just didn't know how far we're moving.
Yeah.
Okay. That's all
So,
I
I mean,
wanted to
just
know.
to kind of put it in perspective.
So it's just going to be 7 feet wider than it
Right,
is
so
now.
this is existing entrance width here.
Right.
And we just want to move it out to there.
Right.
So,
Okay.
yeah. It's about 24 feet to about 30 feet.
Okay.
Mr. Nurnberger?
There, I don't know if that exists. I didn't go by, use the store all the time. But you have a storage container outside in the back. Is that going to be existing forever? Is that something that you have to have? Is that something that it's just temporary?
So look, I'm a consultant for for
Okay.
Wallace. I know it's not a permanent structure on the facility.
It's, no, it's mobile container or whatever. It's just behind the site.
Yeah.
It was not approved at the site plan or that, anytime I've seen anything. So I'm just curious if that's going to be an existing condition or will that be changed?
You know, I don't have purview to that information, so I can't address that.
Fair enough. Ms. Kirkmeyer, can you address this point?
Yes, there is a container out there, and we've been having some issues. Again, that's actually why this is a text amendment for consideration, not because of mobile on the run site, but because of other proposals for temporary structures, which usually are storage containers and commercial dumpsters. So, but we do know that that one was out there. I did not know that until I went out to look at the site, but we'll have to address that through
Because
code
it's
enforcement.
hidden, but
Well,
the
we'll enforce it through
resident
code
can see it.
enforcement if it's, you know, again, it has not been approved, so it needs to be addressed through code enforcement.
I think
Not
it
for
should
site
be
plan
addressed
review, but-
before we vote on this. To me, that should be something that owner should be here and address for us before we take it up, anything like that.
Well, but it's not part of a site plan. They're not compliant with our code, and the city needs to enforce its code. I agree with you. It's an
Yeah,
issue. I
it's an
think it's a-
existing condition. They have the site. They want to be approved for improvements to the site. To me, it should be addressed. I'm sorry, that's where I feel. I would not vote for it.
And I would plead that, you know, what we're asking for as far as the entrance width, you know, what may have nothing to do with the facts that there are some landscape items that we've talked with Lisa about that we fully intend to address, and this would
So
fall
will
in that
you
same.
agree to have the container removed?
Oh, no, I can't do that, sir.
Well,
I'm sorry.
you're negotiating on plannings and that sort of thing.
Well,
So
those are code enforcement issues, and we're more than happy to work with the staff on those
The
code enforcement issues, but.
container is a code enforcement issue as well.
Right, and what we're asking for tonight is that the plan be amended to allow for the widening of the entrance for a concern of safety, and that's that we're asking for. We're not asking for the approval of this body to say that there's differences in the landscape plan or that there's differences with the containers or the other facilities on the site. So that's what we're asking for.
Ms. Bilderback?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You may not be asking for it, but anytime someone comes in with a site plan approval, then we look at the whole thing, has been our practice. And I would say Mr. Nurnberger's request to have the owner representative to come in to address the code enforcement items with us as a part of the discussion surrounding the consideration of the site plan approval, I think would be a reasonable request that he made. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I have a question.
Mr. Shipley.
Have they been cited with a code violation, or is it just in violation?
No, you do have to go back there to see it, so we're not aware of its presence, but again, we've been on site looking at this, so.
And it's behind it's a, what is it, like a shipping container behind the building?
Yeah,
Thank you.
so.
Is it true that the presence of that storage container is in violation of our codes?
If they have not received any type of approval, the way our code is right now, for a special use to have a temporary storage container. I don't know of any site plans that were approved ever for temporary storage containers to be permanent. So we're usually dealing with it on a temporary basis, and the process to get approval for those would be to go through a special use. It's an internal process, and unless the planning director feels like it needs to go directly to the Board of Aldermen, it's just an internal process to look at the nature of the request and either approve it or deny it. A timetable gets put on it, because again, it's temporary, so it's not supposed to be there for, a long period of time, so.
This one's been there for years.
Are there any legal or administrative obstacles to a motion to approve this site plan with the stipulation that that temporary storage container be removed?
I'm going to defer that to our attorney.
With the approval of a site plan, it's administrative. You're looking to see if the proposed site plan complies with your ordinance. So I would hesitate in putting that on as a condition, because it really doesn't pertain to the site plan itself for all the improvements. That's more of a temporary thing that's brought on. It's more of a code enforcement issue that can be easily remedied. There's a administrative permit that can be issued for it. So I would hesitate in doing that without the owner affirmatively stating on the record that they would agree to that.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, and I understand, and I understand Ms. Bilderback's point. I'm more concerned, and I understand that practice is important, what this commission has done. I'm more concerned with what are we here to do, and as was just mentioned, this is an administrative decision. Does it in fact meet the requirements? And I think that with that in mind, if this meets a requirement, if this meets the ordinance, if this meets our planning and zoning code, then I think that we need to take action on this.
Any further discussion from commissioners before we open this up to the audience? I see some young ladies in the audience that may be waiting for this application. Is that true, young ladies?
It is.
Would you like to address the commission on this application? Will you please step forward and introduce yourself and your address?
My name is Lynn Good. I live at 8783 Brentwood Place, which is right by the mobile station. I've been there since 1977. I was confused by the gentleman's discussion of safety and going into a light. That light can be moved. It's not in a good spot. So the light can be moved. That's a whole separate issue. I think the main issue that I would like you to consider is this is a residential street. It's a narrow street. It's a very busy street with the mobile station in particular and the alley that is just a little further up the street from the gas station. And because it's a one-way street, there's a lot of traffic from residents. Long ago, this was approved as a gas station, long ago, I think maybe in the late 50s, and that hasn't changed. There's a reason that that driveway is 22 feet and not 30 feet. I don't think there was ever any intention for a huge tanker truck. I've seen the tanker trucks. It scares the heck out of me. The tanker truck to turn onto a residential street into the gas station. I don't think there was ever any intention for that to happen. And there's been damage to water drains on the road. It was fixed. The next thing I knew, it was damaged again. My guess is it was from such a large truck, possibly the tanker truck. There's been damage to the curb. I can't say what caused that. There's one other element here. The business across the street on Brentwood Boulevard is vacant. We don't know what's going to go in there yet. It's going to increase traffic, we know that, because it will be a business and there will be cars coming in and out of there. So anyway, we're taking away green space, we're encroaching upon the residential area, and I think it's a safety hazard and very unwise to have a tanker truck turn up a dead-end street that's very narrow. So, thank you.
Yep, thank you, Ms. Good.
I know none of you have addressed that, but as a resident, right there, I see these things. I see the traffic patterns. I see the people walking on the sidewalk there, and it's kind of scary. And you know what? There are a lot of trucks. I think we widen that area, we encourage more big trucks to come onto our street, and I think that's unwise.
Okay, all right, thank you, Ms. Good. Sure. Mr. Camp?
So, just to point out, and I agree that the tankers moving in this smaller capacity is definitely, a concern for us, and this is the maneuver that they've made since that gas station has been built. Tankers in Brentwood have expanded, so the alternative to this is them backing off of Brentwood Boulevard, which I would think would present a much higher safety hazard than widening the entrance to accommodate that. And we would love to and this did start out as my client's general contractor normally does these kind of small little upgrades and changes, just widening this entrance. This did present to Lisa by an application just to, hey, I just want to widen this up and move this light pole. That's all we wanted to do, and that's the only reason we're here tonight, is just to widen that and move the light pole to make sure that that movement can safely be facilitated without any kind of jerks and slowdowns and those kind of things in that movement in order to promote the safety of that transport delivery. And that's why we're here.
To avoid jerks and slowdowns for your trucks?
Well, yeah, just so that movement can be more easily accommodated. That there's improvements along here, along Brentwood Place. Both of those, we're just trying to make sure that we can get that tanker in there safely and smoothly, rather than having to stop and back up and move that while their trailer is hanging in Brentwood Boulevard. Yes.
Well, right now it's not hanging on Brentwood Boulevard.
Well, right now what happens is they pull it around and then they're nearly hitting this light pole, which is there. One has actually, the mirror has hit it, and so that's why we just wanted to expand it to make sure that that obstacle is not present in their view, so that way that is something that is not another obstacle in their maneuver.
Okay. Anyone else from the commission from the audience that would like to address the commission? Yes, ma'am. Please step forward and introduce yourself and your address.
My name is Michelle Kraus. I actually own 2 homes on Brentwood Place, 8779 and 8769. Right next to Lynn, the second house up, and then 3 more down. That corner there, I also actually worked for Wallace in the gas station, so I know the trucks come in the middle of the night, and they did used to back up and pull backwards in to get to those tanks. Coming around the corner just started, I don't know when, but they didn't always do that. They did back up, but it was like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning when there was no traffic on Brentwood Boulevard in the evenings. The weight of those trucks, that corner, I don't know if you've ever driven down or gone down to that corner, but with the way that everything is coming off of a dead-end street into that area, having more access to a public, they may come once a day with that truck. But that's open 24 hours, basically. And the traffic that would increase going in and out of that wider gap. Right now, we have a hard enough time getting in and out of our street, but fighting the increased traffic that's trying to come into our street to get into the bigger space that they could make it in that way so they could try and get into the gas station, which has now been limited. We used to have the shell down the street, so the gas stations have been reduced, and so there's more traffic going into this one gas station than ever went in there before. It just, 1, the streets, 2, our access, 3, I think safety for a truck not to hit a lamp versus safety to people that live there, walk there, drive there, trying to get in and out of that subdivision is a minor safety concern versus the other safety concern.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Cross. Anyone else, any commissioner like to comment? We can either vote on this tonight or we can kick this over to subcommittee? What's the desire of the commission? Okay, I'll
I have
entertain a
another question. for
Yes, Mr.
Brown.
Favazza.
Are you saying most of the trucks are coming in the middle of the night?
When I
Currently?
worked for Mobile,
Okay.
the delivery of the gas was in the middle of the night, 2:30 to 3:30. I worked under Wallace at Mobile as the nighttime clerk.
And I think that is still the case, and lately, that's what I've seen, it's in the middle of the night.
Okay,
So it
I'm
wouldn't-
sorry.
It wouldn't affect traffic in any way.
Brentwood, they can still come in.
Brentwood's wide open. It takes huge curves through that.
There's
Okay.
very little traffic on Brentwood during the middle of the night, after about 10 or 11 o'clock,
So
actually.
unless they change their cycle of delivery to the middle of the day or after.
Okay, I'm sorry. If you have to step up to the mic if you're going to say
No, I'm
anything.
sorry, I just
That's-
think they changed their cycle of delivery. When I worked there, the delivery cycle was in the middle of the night. I would call in at 11 o'clock for the next day's delivery, which would come at about the 1, 2 o'clock in the morning.
So one suggestion is that Mr. Nuremberger has raised some issues. We have some residents that have raised some issues. I'd be inclined to recommend that we take this up at the subcommittee meeting, but happy to honor the will of the commission. If we do want to take it up at subcommittee, is there a motion along those lines?
Maybe a good idea, since this truck's maybe too heavy for our residential street. Maybe.
Second.
I'm not sure, so, interesting.
Second.
Sorry, I couldn't hear.
Yeah.
So there's been a motion by Mr. Lewis, which has been seconded by Ms. Bilderback, to table this application until the May subcommittee meeting.
We just ask a question too, where do we bring up the code violation stuff? Because there's screening issues and other issues here.
Yeah, you have to step up to the mic, ma'am, but your code issues would all be brought up with staff, and we can talk about that after the meeting. Yeah, correct. Any further discussion on the pending motion to table this application until the subcommittee meeting?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. All right, thank you. Mr. Camp, are you available? I think, Ms. Kirkemeyer, when is that subcommittee meeting? 24th, 6 PM? Are you available?
Is that the last Wednesday?
Is that correct? Oh, it is May 31st.
And is that a meeting Mr. Wallace could attend to?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, normally the VP of Operations, Mark Jordan, joins me, however, his father is ill in New York, and you know, I quite frankly did just look at this as a small minor amendment to an expansion of a driveway.
Okay, yeah, we didn't. So we'd like to take this up at a subcommittee meeting on May the 31st at 6 PM. And hopefully, good point, Mr. Shipley, if yourself and Mr. Jordan could be present.
You know, it does say, because we have a fifth Wednesday, the schedule on the city's website actually has the meeting May 31st instead of the 24th.
Right, it's always the
I guess
last
it could
Wednesday.
probably be either if you decide, but, because we'll post the notice.
Right.
But now that you said that, yeah, it's actually, I think, on the schedule for the 31st.
May 31st, is that acceptable to the commission for a subcommittee meeting? Mr. Camp, are you available?
Yeah, the 24th does work better, but we can make the 31st work. I mean, that's the way it's got to be.
You can make it 31st work?
Yes, sir.
Great, thank you. Very good. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your application.
Thank you.
And thank you, Ms. Kraus, Ms. Good. You are both welcome to come to the May 31st meeting as well. Okay, we have two other items for text amendments. Ms. Kirkemeyer, is there any problem with also tabling those until the May 31st meeting
No?
from a staff
We
perspective?
could either table it, I can give you a 2-minute overview, or, again, we'll just take it all up at the next meeting, whatever you're...
Okay, that's acceptable to you?
Yep, that's fine.
Is that acceptable to the commission?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, seeing no objection, they'll be tabled to the May 31st subcommittee meeting. Nomination of officers. Ms. Kirkemeyer, my understanding is we take nominations at this meeting, and then we also take nominations at the June meeting, and then vote at the June meeting?
Right, and then the election at the June meeting, correct.
Okay. So why don't we take these nominations here? Are there any nominations for chair of this August body? Ms. Bilderback.
Do it.
Second.
Third.
You guys don't know what I'm going to say.
She just raised her hand.
I don't know what she's going to say. What are you going to say?
Yeah.
I might wait and think about it. I don't know. I'm torn. I was thinking about nominating Mr. Lewis to make a little shift.
Mr. Naming does a fine job.
Do you have a nomination, Ms. Bilderback, for chair?
No.
I do.
Yes, Mr. Nelson.
Nominate Mr. Daming for chair.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any other nominations for chair? Okay. Are there any nominations for vice chair?
I'm going nominate Clint Lewis for vice chair.
Second.
Any other nominations for vice chair? Okay. Nominations for secretary? Ms. Bilderback?
Mr. Nurnberger?
Second.
Any nominations, further nominations for secretary? Okay, we got one person for each of those slates, so I encourage all of you to think long and hard about additional candidates.
Speeches next time.
They can nominate somebody next meeting if, correct?
That's correct.
Yes.
Okay.
I
Yes.
have to say, we're having problems getting a lot of the motions in the second, and it's not captured by audio, and then even on when we watch the video. So I'm wondering if we're probably to a point we need to maybe just say motion made by and then
Okay.
seconded by. That would help us out a lot in the recording of the meeting, so.
No problem. Understood. Sorry about that. Okay, rationale, Ms. Kirkmeyer, you can handle that?
Yes.
Is there any other business?
The only thing, quickly then, before you adjourn, I did leave just a piece of paper at your areas tonight at your desk entitled Disclosure Report Requirement for Boards and Committees. So I apologize for the confusion. I hope this little blurb just kind of hopefully just clarifies what we need. So because the Board of Aldermen just passed last year requiring that both boards and committees also fill out these disclosure reports, they did that in the middle of the year. And so when they adopted that in September of 2016, they had also included as part of the ordinance that the boards and committees were to comply within a 60-day time period. So when we were bugging you about it last year, it meant that everyone had to turn one in on November 6th of last year. So what happened was that wasn't a complete report for all of 2016. So from here on out, what is to happen is you file annually for the entire calendar year of the preceding year. And so for the first report, since again it only was to November 6th, it didn't reflect till December 31st last year. We are asking that you submit one again for January 1st to December 31st, 2016. They were due by May 1st. I don't think there's any serious consequences for that, but if you could get those in, I'd appreciate it. If it helps you to go back to the report that you filed last year, all the information is on this sheet where you can just pull up your old report from last year. So if we could have your compliance, wonderful. So does that make it clear? Like I said, I know it was a little confusing the first year, but great, okay.
Thank you, Ms. Kirkmeyer. Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved by Sherry.
Seconded by
I think that
Tom.
she means that I would say the motion was made by Ms. Bilderback and the second was made by Ms.
Mr.
Shipley.
Shipley.
Some
Shipley.
some actually say like their full name when they say their vote.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, stand adjourned.